So this presentation is on notational analysis. So starting with an overall background of biomechanics. Biomechanics is the study of the structure and the function of the mechanical aspects of your biological system. So biomechanics is used to identify the optimum techniques in different sports. This is to help enhance performance as well as help with different weaknesses that players may have. It's also successfully used for the assessment of muscular recruitment, also to make sure that the different techniques they have discovered are safe. So biomechanics can be the analysis of sport and exercise with equipment. So this could relate to the grip on shoes for runners to make sure they don't slide around or fall whilst competing. It can also help with injuries as well as preventing sport injuries through technology to see what helps that player the best. So notational analysis itself is the movement, strategy and tactics which occurs in team sports. So notational analysis is an objective way of recording performance so that key elements of that performance can be quantified in a valid and consistent manner. So this was said by Hudgens in 2004. So notational analysis is the gathering and analysis of information from observing performance in a competitive situation. There are three different aspects to this. So the technical analysis is where technique fails or excels, has very practical use for coaches and sport scientists. So this is shown by frequency or percentages. So technical analysis relates to indicators, which is performance in a selection or combination of action variables that aims are to define some or all aspects of performance. That was also said by Hudgens and Franks in 2004. So different sports can have different performance criteria because some are less suited to that form of analysis. So moving on to tactical. Tactical analysis is the coach that is doing the analysis on you. So they have the knowledge of the positions that you're meant to be in and what you're meant to be doing in that role. This analysis will vary depending on your sport and levels that you're playing. So for example, for a 4-year-old's football team, you wouldn't do an elite analysis, like giving them percentages. You would just give them a target for the next game that they have to complete and then tell them where the weaknesses are. This would also mean that the coach's level would change as the feedback they would give. So you would need to be more calm, patient, understanding with a younger team than with an older team that knows what they're doing. The last thing was movement. So movement analysis is the schematics. So this is where you track where your player is throughout the game and whether or not they're in the right place at the right time, doing the right things. So getting the best out of the game. Normally movement analysis is used with a computer and cameras where they can track the player with GPS. However, you can also video the game and add software to follow the player, and you will be able to get a tracking on your player. So performance indicators are a selection of different or even combination of skills, variables or components that are needed in that sport in order for the play to run smoothly. Performance indicators are an important part of notational analysis because if the person analysing the performance doesn't know what some of the different skills look like or should be shown, then they won't be able to give a fair enough conclusion to the team's play. So for example, with a layup in basketball, if the researcher didn't know what that looked like and they thought they were doing the correct technique, then that player wouldn't be able to improve. However, normally if the player isn't getting the end result that they should, they are either doing the skill wrong or it's not their game. So the evolution of notational analysis started with Sanderson's in 1977 analysing a game of squash. Sanderson spent 5 to 8 hours completing this data as well as analysing it. He recorded 1,000 shots over 30 pages of work. When notational analysis first worked, it was longhand, which gave back massive amounts of data that they would have to analyse in order to come to a conclusion, therefore being able to help the players improve at their weak points. After this, 10 years later, in 1987, Hudgens used a computer to do successful and unsuccessful in order to be able to compare. He did this in tennis, so he looked at all the different components involved and made tallies of the successful and unsuccessful shots. Being able to do this on a computer, it made the tallying process a lot easier and quicker, therefore there wasn't too much information to go through, and he came up with the quick conclusion in order to help the team out. So moving on to basketball application, the skills that I've decided to choose are a 3-pointer, 2-pointer, a layup, defensive rebound, and an assist. The reason for this decision is because they are key elements in basketball, and majority of players play a role in at least one of them. The player that I observed was a small forward. So a small forward has a main role in basketball game. This is because they have to be able to score, pass, defend, and be able to win back the rebounds, so defensive as well as offensive. Starting with the 3-pointer, it is where a shot is taken from outside of the 3-pointer line, so the arc around the basket. This is used in a game when you are on the outside of the line and there is a strong defense, therefore you need to take a shot. A 2-pointer, however, is when a shot is completed beyond the arc, so this would be then used in a game when the defense isn't as strong and you can get closer to the basket and take more time to take the shot, which will then add scores to the board. Defensive rebound is when you gain back possession of the ball when the opposition has failed a shot. They are very important during a game because it then means your team will have the possession of the ball and try to score at the other end of the court. Layup, however, is a 2-point shot attempted by leaping below and laying the ball at the side of the basket. These are very useful in basketball games when you have a clear track and instead of stopping and wasting time, you could continue and lay the ball up. Finally, an assist is when you make a pass that leads to a goal. This is common in the game to be used because it helps put points on the board to win. The 3-pointer, 2-pointer, and layup are all used in the game to score, therefore help with winning the game. The defensive rebound is used to make sure your team gains back possession of the ball instead to the opposition getting another shot. Finally, the assist is used to help with a shot in order to gain more points. All of these performance indicators are important to a small forward because they need to be versatile to be able to complete all of these. A small forward is responsible for scoring points, defending, and gaining rebounds as well as passing. Therefore, they would need to be technically good at all of these in order to benefit the team. Notational analysis method. So when doing notational analysis, there are different ways in which you can record the data. You could either watch it live or have it recorded. For doing notational analysis live, there are stages that you need to go through, and these are having a data collection sheet. This is where all the information is on, so the number of different elements that you want to look at, as well as being able to look at successful and unsuccessful. When that is done, you need to be able to know the criteria of the game, because if you don't know the positions or the skills, then you won't be able to give correct feedback. This is important because if you are analysing a sport that you don't know the rules for, it can also help with improving feedback. When doing notational analysis for more elite teams, you're able to use GPS in order to track what they are doing during the game instead of analysing their movement by hand. With this, you're able to talk with the player and show where they have been throughout the game. When doing a live analysis, you should also do a recorded one as well. This is because you'll be able to go back in more details and look at the techniques that they use throughout. When doing notational analysis, depending on the level of performance, there is different equipment that you might need. This would be a data collection sheet, camera, and GPS. So moving on to the advantages and disadvantages. Some of the advantages of notational analysis would be you are able to find the weak points to help improve your teams, as well as finding the strengths to help with what position they need to go in. Overall, this then helps squad selection, who should play for your team and what position they should play in. You are able to also be specific to different players other than scoring, so you can look at defensive, because they don't get as much credit as the people that are scoring because they aren't adding points to the board. You are able to then play back and sit down with the players to look at the different things that they did, as well as determining percentages, which is very useful in basketball. After this, you can then do targets, the disadvantages that they've been doing throughout the game, and just generally give improvements that they need to do. So moving on to the disadvantages now. So some disadvantage would be that it could cost a lot, and and most of the time you're not able to keep up if you're not recording it, so you may miss some key elements of the game. It is very time consuming to track all the data, and you may in fact get distracted by watching the game instead of watching the players. You also need to have a lot of knowledge about the game you're analysing, because if you don't, then the feedback you are giving will not help improve them. It also doesn't take into account the context for the players, so who they're playing, if they're in a different position, and overall stuff like that. So this here is my data analysis schematic. So I looked at 2 different players with drastic different scores. So I looked at George, who was my more elite player, and Tabby, who was the less experienced player, and these are their schematics. So you can see with George's, he was up and down the court throughout the middle and reached all the sides, so he reached all around the court. So he was scoring down this end here, and he is down here a lot, and then up here is where he got all his rebounds. With Tabby, however, she's stuck to one side of the court, so looks that she is stronger on this side, dribbling, and here scoring. She had a couple attempts, or it was able to get some rebounds and pass out, and here she also did some rebounds, and she didn't really cross through the middle that much, which George, however, did, and he also started in the middle. So this is my graph. So these graphs show different things. So this one here is the 2-pointer, this one's the 3-pointer, layup, defensive rebound, and assist. So as you can see, this is Tabby's, George's, and the mean, and I show this throughout the whole thing. So as you can see, for the 2-pointer, Tabby got 20%, and the score that she got was, she scored 1 and missed 4, and then George got 75%, so he scored 3, missed 1, and then the mean overall was 39%. So because the mean was 39%, the overall first scored was 12, and then 19 missed, and 31 overall. So this shows that obviously George was above average and Tabby was below. So moving on to the 3-pointer, as you can see, Tabby and the mean are exactly the same. So that shows that it was 0. Not a lot of 3-pointers were scored or attempted. So Tabby was 0 all round. George, however, scored 2 and missed 2, so he's at 50% there. And then so there was overall, there were 3 scored, 9 missed, and 12 total. So the mean was 0. Now moving on to layups. So Tabby again is at 0%, George is 67%, and the mean is 33. So Tabby didn't score any but missed 1, and George scored 2 and missed 1, getting 67%, and the mean was 7 were scored, 17 were missed, and 24 were made in total, so that's 33. Moving on down here to defensive rebounds. So these aren't in percentages, these are just in scores. So with defensive rebounds, George got 5, Tabby is here with 0, and the mean was 0.8. Finally, with assists, you can see a bit more clearly that George and the mean are exactly the same, and Tabby is below. So Tabby got 1, George had 3, and the mean was 3. So as you can see overall with these, you can see that George is, for the majority of them, all above average of the team. The means shown, some of them Tabby was close to average, but for the majority she was below average or just average, which shows that George was a more elite player, and I will go into more detail about all of this in 6.4. So with the data analysis, this shows